but this one's about more specifically being a student during the pandemic. So this is called Schooling Us on a Return to Normal. It's been 6 months since this began. 6 months since the week from hell, where something new and terrifying seemed to pop up on the news or my Twitter feed every day. 6 weeks since blasting the REM song, It's the End of the World as We Know It, seemed both all too inappropriate and beyond hysterical. Despite all we have seen in this time, despite the fear that lurks under the surface, the world proceeds to move on in an attempt to reach the normal that evades us. Life continues, but the risk increases. As college campuses across the country continue to open with face-to-face instruction, I am reminded of the fact that this is nothing new. Over 100 years ago, in the early days of the Spanish influenza, students were sent back to their open campuses despite the dangers that faced them there. Universities like Harvard were uncertain about what precautions to take and unprepared to deal with the oncoming crisis, so they did nothing. In the face of total upheaval and a disease that would wipe out thousands, life continued, but the risk increased. Today, we feel the same. As the lives of students resume, they are left with nothing but their minds, balancing their own fear of the world outside their doors with the stress of being a full-time student on a campus that offers little support for either. They feel the guilt that comes from the absence of productivity, that comes from a lack of motivation, that comes from a paralyzing anxiety. And yet they are told to come back, encouraged to hold face-to-face classes as if nothing is wrong, as if a campus of nearly 20,000 can possibly be safe. Life continues, but the risk increases. My 21st birthday fell just under 2 weeks after my own university restarted its in-person classes for the fall, classes that I believed would have to be moved online again once the school realized how little its students actually cared. I wasn't able to hug my family on my birthday or go to a bar and legally drink until 3 a.m. because a 20-something college kid refused to accept anything less than a normal school year. I understood the sacrifices I had to make, even as I see friends post pictures of their booze and body-filled living rooms on a Saturday night because they still believe that they and those around them are invincible. Life continues, but the risk increases. As we move through the unknown into the land of even greater uncertainty, our concept of normal has to shift. There are new joys to be found as we weigh this out. We stress and we work and we yearn to be on the other side of it all, where parties are freely accepted and 21st birthdays don't have to be squandered in quarantine. But we also discover new recipes, pick up old hobbies.
Thank you.
Have been given. Our world must adjust, no matter how tough it may be, because life continues. Thank you again. That was my second piece. I don't have any more to share. I think I only have a couple of minutes left. But thank you very much for listening. I can go ahead and pass it on to the next person.
All right. So next we have Sarah Ishii from Texas Women. What? I always mess up that name. Women.
That's okay. Yeah, so myself, Leslie Molden, and Michael Mulvey are all presenting. Our panel is titled Creativity in Lockdown, 3 Artistic Approaches in the Pandemic. And I'll just read a little bit about the abstract and then introduce our first presenter. The fear, frustration, and uncertainty that have emerged during the COVID-19 pandemic forces individuals to examine the spaces we inhabit, reevaluate relationships with others in place, and scrutinize social issues. For artists, processing these concepts can take place through creative practice, form, and/or concept. This panel examines the lockdown's impact on 3 artists' work. Each adopts a different medium and angle to comment on personal and social issues that surface in the pandemic's wake. Our first presenter is Leslie Malton. Leslie was born and raised in the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan area. She earned her BFA in Visual Arts Studies and an Art EC through 12 teaching certification through the University of North Texas in 2018. Leslie is a sculptor, installation, and intermedia artist working with cast or welded metals, foam, digital 3D design, photography, and video. She is interested in how science fiction and escapism can be used to inform realities in the natural world. Leslie has exhibited in over 20 local and internationally rated exhibitions since beginning her MFA at Texas Women's University in 2018. She recently concluded her MFA thesis exhibition, The Interventionists, and will officially graduate just in a few weeks in May 2021. And Leslie is looking forward to continuing a fulfilling career as both artist and educator.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Today, I'd like to present my quarantine video series called Dystopia, the Humanity of a Modern Pandemic. And first, I'd like to show some of the stuff that was going on right before quarantine hit Texas Women's University. On the left, I was spending a lot of time in the metal shop at Texas Women's University. And then in the middle, I had just begun to incorporate some of my more smaller sculptures into very sci-fi centered landscapes, incorporating lots of color through photography. And then on the right, you'll see my home studio and where I had to quickly transition to as an artist. And it was very difficult to switch all of a sudden from this metal shop to somewhere where I couldn't really work or have access to those materials anymore. So that really forced me to focus, especially on my concept, and utilize resources I had available to me. This is also part of my home studio, my patio, and that's when I began to incorporate my business cards and using those to form sculptures similar to the way I would with my metal sculptures. The first video that came about from that series is called Day After Day After Day After Day. And this was a representation of that monotonous blur that occurred at the start of quarantine. For me, that was April of 2020. And some of the fearful unknowns that were associated with that. And you will find that the sound that I designed for this particular video also incorporates some of those fears. And I'll play a short clip. I had continued on that sci-fi narrative as well. In this next video called When Man Reaches Deep Space, I had recorded some of the construction noises that started outside my apartment during quarantine, and that drove me to insanity. And also in my videos, I really encompass the object as myself. And so this object is very stagnant during the construction noises that are happening around it. And I also had to add in a little bit of science humor to it because I imagine this is what it would sound like when man reaches deep space. And that goes on for about a minute. In this next video called Mornings, this is when that period of quarantine where I really began to feel that heavy depression weigh in, and it was especially prominent during the mornings when all I had to look forward to was wake up and move 5 feet over to my couch. And I recorded the sound of a North Texas thunderstorm outside my apartment that really weighs into that depression that was felt during this time. This one does have a little more movement with the object because this was me struggling to get out of bed in the mornings.
Hi, is anybody having problems getting into a breakout room?
A lot of anger towards our current administration and the media at the time. And so for this video, I literally dangled a sculpture by a thread And it was actually to the recorded sound of my dishwasher. I'll play a bit. And although there are 7 videos, I'll only be showing a few today. And this will be the final video of that series called 1200 My Worth to My Government, because this was the time that the administration had announced the $1,200 stimulus check. And I truly felt like, well, this must be what we are worth to our government then. And I know many other people in this country, as well as myself and my partner, truly financially struggled at this time. And so for this video, it's the longest of the 7, it's almost 15 minutes. And I repeatedly hit this sculpture with a hammer 1,200 times. The sound for this video was also designed by me, and one of the softwares I had available to me at the time was a GarageBand on my laptop. And so I utilized some of the synthesizers and different electronic sounds through that app to create some of these soundtracks. And so at the end of this series, I came up with the name Dystopia, the Humanity of a Modern Pandemic, because I truly felt like we were living in a dystopia. And this was my very human response to that dystopia. And also, it was also a very huge shift for me as an artist. And so that actually led to my current work, my most current work, The Interventionists, which is my MFA thesis exhibition that uses the sci-fi narrative to address land conservation. Happy Earth Day, by the way. And thank you for listening to my talk. And you can screenshot my information below if you'd like to learn more. I'd be happy to meet up with Zoom over anybody if you'd like to discuss art or anything going on in the world. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Leslie. Our next presenter is Michael Mulvey. Michael's work is rooted in the visualization of sociological practices. His research interests range from capturing the cultural divide along the border with Mexico to the gentrification of West Dallas neighborhoods, using methods of documentary as well as conceptually constructed still lifes in order to create various pathways to access cultural complexities. His practice includes the use of analog and digital devices, as well as site-specific installations and photo sculpture. His most recent project is documenting the spaces in our society that are in transition. These transitory spaces are metaphors for the complete upheaval of society during the 2020 pandemic, geopolitical turmoil, and Black Lives Matter initiatives. He currently lives in Richardson, Texas, and is a Master of Fine Arts candidate at Texas Women's University in the College of Visual Arts, and will also be graduating in May 2021.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to share my screen now. Right. So, transitory spaces is my presentation today. Actually, okay. So I had to get used to this cursor here. So in the pandemic beginnings, obviously we all had major change, and just like everyone, I was in these wonderful studio spaces at Texas Women's University, and we were forced to leave them pretty immediately and pretty abruptly. And we still had coursework, obviously, to complete. And while I was possibly able to continue what I was working on, the profound change that we were undergoing just seemed too interesting to not explore. So in terms of such a historic change and chaos and new beginnings, I was really interested in what would happen to our spaces and what they would look like during this process. And the concept that all these spaces are in the state of transition and documenting those spaces. So my influences are Gordon Parks and Dorothea Lange, and both use black and white film and both use large format cameras, and both were documenting other types of calamities and disasters and social change. And I had a background previously before studying art in a documentary setting, but I had never used a large format camera, and I had never really gone about something as specific as a place or a space, and how that, and what that looks like, and how those can actually represent the change that we're undergoing. So big question was, where to do this? And I took over a bathroom in my home, and to the chagrin of my family, and I would do the work at night, generally in the dark room, and I would scan the negatives. So a photo of me, and that's very strange that I just happen to have this like plaid facial covering. At the time, I don't even think I could find a facial covering. This was like a facial covering that a neighbor had made. And it just happened to like randomly go with my shirt that day. It was not a planned experience, but I used an 8x10 camera, and in the spirit of Dorothea and Gordon Parks. So before anyone asks, how did you do this on 8x10? This is the one image that was a drone image. And I specifically just really was in love with this space, and all these individual parking spaces at a high school, and they're all individually painted by the students. And so they do represent an identity of every student in this space, and they never would return to these spaces during that school year, and obviously didn't have prom and graduation and other things. So this is a bar in the Deep Ellum area. It is permanently closed. Very interesting sign. This was a very interesting space. The Omni, which is a wonderful giant hotel at about $300 a night, is kind of in this corridor where there are a lot of lanes of traffic, and they will post, you know, advertising and various things. And in this case, they were every day they were showing these statements of, you know, how to deal with the pandemic. And it just so happens that in this space behind me is where like a lot of homeless people live. And it just was the metaphor of that, like this random sofa turned up in a place where people are homeless, and this idea of like staying home and what is home, especially for so many of the people that don't have a home. This week, downtown Dallas, that's a kind of a lone security guard going from building to building. The pharmacy's closed. Just all really strange metaphors in a time and place where people actually maybe needed medicine and things. We saw a lot of these kinds of spaces where the city would close it off, and they would do it in various ways. And I've often wondered if it was what they had on hand, or if this is like what they just came up with in a Zoom meeting. But there were these variety of ways of making sure that nobody used city equipment, so that there were no gatherings. A diner that has just now since reopened. We saw a lot of, I think it's like the summer of plywood. So the reaction to the pandemic was plywood. And then when we had BLM protests, there was like a secondary reaction to plywood. It was just like a 4-month window of plywood, it seemed like, in a lot of urban spaces in Dallas. And this idea that you weren't safe. Another image from a derelict parking garage, also near a fairly nice hotel in the background where people were living. This is from a food distribution site. Prom, store or boutique. It has just recently opened, and it was very interesting. They would keep these dresses, I don't know, for months, as if like prom was going to happen again late or something, but it never did. And also during Easter, I met with some priests, and they were riding around. It was a time where people couldn't go to church, and churches were trying to figure out Zooms, and these priests actually like went on bikes, and they were going out in the community. And this was a priest that was praying over someone who was two people that are elderly and another person who had cancer. And again, another prayer situation in the front yard. It was a very interesting time because, like you see in this photograph, nobody's wearing face masks. There was this reluctance to wear, or if we needed to wear, what was the distance that we needed to share between each other and not get the virus. And this was what was negotiated in this front yard. And this priest is praying, and the person who has the phone using 2020 technology is FaceTiming a prayer to her parent in Brazil. And I'm using an 8x10 camera. It was always all very strange. Downtown Dallas is like a parking garage area where you would normally have an attendant, and just these very odd things that line up now that wouldn't usually, advertising that didn't change. Again, another space of how to not have a tire swing, like with zip ties. And then this last image I'm going to show is a family. It was also from that Easter Sunday. This concept of that our front yards and our homes and this concept of front and backyard or wherever you reside is really your only refuge in this months on months turmoil that we all dealt with. And this family had everything to play with and use and so forth outside, and we're super excited to see a priest come by. And here's my information. I'd love to talk more. If you want to reach out or have any questions or just want to talk about art or photography, I would love to.
Thank you, Michael. So I'm our last presenter at the panel. My name is Sarah Ishii. I am an interdisciplinary feminist artist and scholar. I have a background in visual arts as well as women and gender studies. So my ongoing research examines creative interventions into social justice issues related to contemporary feminist art. I'm also interested in Gloria Anzaldúa theorizing, and then also issues related to interpersonal violence. In my art practice employs painting and mixed media to investigate the interdimensions of emotional and verbal abuse within the larger spectrum of interpersonal violence. My work seeks to confront the silence surrounding emotional and verbal abuse, making and kind of like marking the impact of that type of abuse, but also acknowledging the resilience of victims and survivors. In terms of educational background, I did my PhD in multicultural women and gender studies at Texas Women's University. And then I also have an MFA in art and technology from the University of Texas at Dallas, and an MA in feminist gender and women's studies from York University in Toronto. Currently, I'm a visiting assistant professor in art history at Texas Women's University. I'll go ahead and share my screen now. And there we go. So my part of the panel presentation is titled Shelter in Place Series and the Pandemic Paradox. Beginning in early January 2020, the events of COVID-19 pandemic unfolded. And by March in the US, the states began to issue shelter in place, excuse me, or stay-at-home mandates, which required all residents to stay at home except to go to essential jobs or shop for essential needs. And so while the concept of sheltering in one's home might feel comfortable and safe. For people living in abusive situations, the home is where interpersonal violence frequently occurs. Intimate partner violence, or IPV, is a term used to describe abuse and violence that occurs between people in a close relationship, and it encompasses physical, sexual, emotional, and verbal abuses. And although a victim's experience will often include two or like all of these forms of abuse. One key aspect of intimate partner violence is this tendency for it to be enacted in unseen and private spaces, such as the home. And so when conditions such as the pandemic forces people to then be in the home, abusive situations exacerbate, resulting in a global surge of domestic violence cases. Carolyn Bradbury Jones and Louise Isham termed this phenomenon a pandemic paradox, in which those who are victims and survivors of abusive relationships are uniquely impacted by the pandemic and these lockdown measures. They note that, quote, unintentionally, lockdown measures may therefore grant people who abuse greater freedom to act without scrutiny or consequence. So furthermore, the psychological stress and economic crisis related to staying at home adds additional tension to abusive dynamics. So prior to the lockdown in Texas, I had been creating work that examined my own experiences as a survivor of emotional and verbal abuse. And during the lockdown, and even after the lockdown, I thought about how lucky I was that I was no longer in that situation, and like how horrific my life would have been if I had still been in that relationship during the lockdown. And then also thinking about how so many other people are not as fortunate as I am. And so it really prompted me to go on to create these works. And they're a series of mixed media paintings on Yupo paper. And so it's this kind of this plastic type of paper that I use to depict different psychological aspects of an abusive relationship, using a variety of materials such as acrylic ink, nail varnish, glitter, and jewelry metals. I abstractly represent abusive and victimized forms bound together in this pandemic paradox. I title the works in the series Shelter in Place in reference to these lockdowns occurring during the global pandemic. And similar to the way that COVID spread across the globe, IPV knows no boundaries. It spans across race and ethnicity, socioeconomic class, sexuality, ability, and geographic place. However, as statistics continue to demonstrate, women have higher rates of experiencing IPV. And so my choice of feminine or craft materials such as the nail varnish and glitter, draw ties between women and victimization, as well as work to break down the hierarchies that are often constructed between fine art and craft. Because I didn't want my presentation to go too long, I'm just going to talk about two in the series. This first, titled Shelter in Place 1, we see the abusive form pinning down the victim survivor form, looking as if it's about to feed. Within emotional and verbal abuse, an abuser may rely on a victim for attention and admiration, which is typically termed narcissistic supply. Such attention is usually garnered by provoking their victim and networked with a series of other tactics such as gaslighting, verbal abuse, and hot-cold treatments. Discomfort and stress bubble out of the victim form like a disease as the multi-tongue abusive form moves closer to the wound. In addition to the abuser's four legs that trap the victim survivor, the pair are bound in a bulky silver chain that tangles the two forms together. Prevented from escaping, the victim survivor is stuck and isolated with the abuser. In Shelter in Place 2, I further depict this concept of a double bind. The victim survivor form's been wrapped up and under the control of the abuser form. So feeling as if one is walking on eggshells, the victim survivor cannot move without being monitored by the abusive form. A second binding of gold chain secures the two forms together. And while we see these sort of subtle splatters that burst through to imply the constant struggle and fight for self-preservation. So as a group of works that relate to a larger body of pieces that investigate dynamics of emotional abuse, I intend for these shelter-in-place paintings to offer another lens through which we can view abuse, one impacted by social institutions as well as global conditions such as the pandemic. It's my hope that the work may resonate with other victims and survivors and validate their own feelings and experiences. And I also hope to participate with other feminist artists in the sort of move to raise awareness through art to the issues of IPV and its prevalence in society. And I just have my works cited here, as well as my contact. And I'll go ahead and stop sharing. I think we ended a little early because we had a little extra time at the beginning. I don't know if there are any questions or if we want to just move on to the next panel.
So thanks to the College of Art and Letters at Northern Arizona University for hosting this conference, and to David Van Ness for his work on organizing the conference. This is what it is. This phrase suggests resignation. People use it in circumstances where things cannot be changed. This is what it is. The title of my presentation refers to accepting the situation of being an artist during a pandemic and using the situation as an avenue for change and progress. So just as a quick introduction, as far as what kind of art I create, also being a poet and spoken word performer. During the pandemic, it has been a challenge to stay focused on art making, to energize one's studio practice during a lockdown. So let me begin by saying most of my work revolves around the personalization of social issues in a serial format, which is the structure for my art making. Recently explored topics include societal impositions upon body image, mass media perspectives about women and violence, and sociocultural burdens endured by women. The social issues are viewed through a multifarious lens of mass media, social media, and art history. My fiber works, and on the screen on the right-hand side is an example of my fiber works, Cry, Die, and Just Make Pies, are created by hand sewing my hair into various surfaces. I consider myself a self-taught fiber artist. I actually take drawing techniques like hatching, cross-hatching, extended scribble, and I apply them to the format of sewing. I've been sewing my hair since 2000. The decision to utilize hair as a vehicle for making art is informed by sociocultural symbolism, feminism, and religious symbolism. Collecting and sorting my hair is a ritualistic act. And what attracts me to utilizing hair, part of that attraction to the medium, is the dichotomy surrounding hair. So on the one hand, it can be a sexy and engaging tactile. And then on the other hand, it can be repulsive, like hair in your soup or hair on your hotel pillow. And then as a painter, I focus on the medium of watercolor. And my example on this slide is two women walk into a bar, watercolor on aqua board. Voluptuous layers of watercolor stain surfaces to create figurative forms. Washes of color depict the imperfections of flesh. I think of flesh as not being about inaccuracy of color and form, but it's about having an eye for the bump and the lump and the chunk of blemished flesh. My drawing installations are composed of scratchy, nervous lines trailing across a wall. These are large-scale on-site installations done with Conte, sometimes incorporating vinyl appliques, liquid graphite, and specialty fabric. These drawing installations are done on-site at universities, at commercial galleries, museums, other art venues. The process of creating these installations allows me to engage with students, faculty, art gallery patrons, and other community members. And this is normative discontent that I created at Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado. It is 12 foot by 24 feet. And then I'm also a poet and spoken word performer. I move effortlessly through varying tempos and characters. I create performances made up of frank and touching vignettes, and I punctuate the performances with tailored costumes for each performance. So I'm going to show you a quick video. It's only 2 minutes. It's the poem Happy, and it's from my performance at Freeform Gallery in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
So I'm very glad to be part of the program this evening. This is my last poem. I am doing a performance in Durango, Colorado on March the 2nd. The larger performance, more costumes. Anyway, I was once told that I don't write anything happy or upbeat. So one summer when I was in my studio, I decided to write a happy poem. And it's titled I haven't. It's really about reconciling identity stereotypes. So it's really more than just my happy point, but this happens. So here it is. I'm happy and I know it's looking for my fucking man. I'm not the angry poet choking on dead words. I'm not constipated with middle-aged frustration. I'm not the furious one-eyed feminist slam dancing by myself. I'm not the white-ass Latina who farts from the world. I'm not the bitter Mexican-American with a hyphen up my ass. I'm happy and I know beer. The brown bitch got a job.
During the pandemic, what now? So artists are by nature creatures of solitude, yet they blossom under certain circumstances of interaction with their community. Exhibition receptions, live performances, artist talks, conferences such as this one, exhibition installations. And then spoken word performers come alive in front of an attentive and responsive audience. They write, rehearse, create costumes and props for those intoxicating minutes in the limelight. So how do I stimulate ideas in a silo? So trying to find the remedy. So I started taking an acting class in spring of 2020 at San Juan College in Farmington, New Mexico. I took the class to improve upon my spoken word performances. And then when the pandemic happened It caused a shutdown across the nation, and my college course became an online Acting 1 class. As students, we had to learn how to record ourselves and submit our assignments via video. I'm not a particularly tech savvy person. When I taught at El Centro in Dallas, I was known for saying my computer hated me and it was plotting behind my back. So if a technology problem occurred, it would occur and happen to me. Well, my HP laptop computer has a video editor, and I recorded my Acting 1 monologues on my phone, and then I used the video editor to complete my assignments. So I'm showing you a quick 2-minute scene. It's my last assignment for the class. We had to play all the characters in a scene. It's a scene from the movie Fargo. And I'm showing it because by the end of the semester, I had gotten comfortable enough with the video editor as a tool. So let's see if I can do this now. Let me share.
So where are you girls from?
Is that
Shasta,
working?
LeSueur, but I went to high school in White Bear Lake. Go Bears. Okay. I want you to tell me what these fellows looked like. Well, the little guy, he was kind of funny looking. In what way? I don't know. Just funny looking. Can you be any more specific? I really couldn't say. He wasn't circumcised. Was he funny looking apart from that? Yeah. So you were having sex with the little fella then? Uh-huh. Is there anything else you can tell me about him? No. Like I said, he was funny looking, more than most people even. And what about the other fellow? He was a little older, looked like the Marlboro Man. Oh, yeah? Yeah. Maybe I'm saying that because he was smoking Marlboros a lot. Uh-huh. A subconscious type thing. Oh, yeah. That can happen. Yeah. They said they were going to the Twin Cities. Oh, yeah? Yeah. Yeah. Is that useful for you? Oh, you bet. Yeah.
Something else is happening here. Oops. Sorry about that. I guess this reinforces my point that I'm really not good at technology. Okay. So after my college course, I started thinking about how I could take my newly acquired video skills and apply them to my artwork. So I often receive questions about how the hair drawings created. How do you get your hair? What kind of needles do you use? How do you sew these works? Is it just your hair or is it the hair of others? And it seemed natural at the time to give visuals to these questions via process videos. So because many of my exhibitions had been canceled or postponed in 2020, I had the time to slow down my studio process and document the process of sewing hair. So this is how it started. So the first video, it shows my process in sewing a drawing with my brunette hair into watercolor canvas. The second video, I've started going gray and I wanted to start using my gray hair to sew with. And so I ended up having to simply collect the hair and then sit and sort out the gray hairs. And so I made a short video to show that. And then last one, which is showing a larger piece using gray hair in the actual process of it, is the third video. So I went from using the video editor for a class that I was taking to using it in my own studio for my own work. Okay. So this is actually the piece that you just saw on the video, which is called Marching Across Your Lawn. The Grass is on Fire. It's 32 by 37. And this piece is actually on display in New York, in Brooklyn, at a gallery called Amos Eno Gallery. And the exhibition that it's in actually opens tomorrow. So I wanted to put this all together. I wanted to figure out a way that I could put my artwork, my poetry, my spoken word performances, and tie them all together within a video format. So I decided to create a video for a poem that was relatively new called These United States. The opening sequence of the video has my wall drawings from Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado. And then there are 3 stanzas, and each one is staged very similar to the idea of the monologues for my acting class. The minimal setup, I feel like it lets the viewer focus on the words of the poem. So I'm actually exhibiting this video at Amos Eno Gallery here in Brooklyn. So here is the video where I put it all together.
We are the women of these United States. We are the women of these United States. We are the women of these United States. Somos las mujeres of these United States. We are the women of these United States. We are the women of these United States. These United States, these United States. We are the women, we are the women, we are the women of these United States. We are the women of these United States. We are the women of these United States. We birthed every president of these United States, Republican and Democrat, wiped their shitty bottoms, while abstract forms of drool mushroomed across our shoulders, spewed particles of food, dotted our tangled mommy hair. We birthed every politician, filibustering lawmakers with snot-filled noses and flushed, clammy foreheads. We birthed crooked senators, unethical representatives, and con men who hid behind Betsy's flag. We are the mothers, wives, sisters, daughters of these United States. We are the women of these United States. We were raped here in this jewel-encrusted country of wealth and industry, raped in our Betty Crocker homes, within the hallowed halls of academia, raped after dark in Sesame Street parks. We were raped by everyday sexism, victim-blaming, slut-shaming, misogynistic language. We were raped by little boys, acne-laden teens, and clean-shaven adult men. We are the mothers, wives, sisters, daughters of these United States. We are the women of these United States. We plug away despite the gender wage gap, labor each and every day for rusty pennies, short of your crisp dollar. We grin and grind, our asses shimmy from 9 to 5. Elbow grease makes the sweat drip between our breasts. We're the work donkey. We toil within the industries of these United States. Double duty Debbie. Unpaid hours plus 8 hours. It's not drudgery, it's a calling. Change the diapers, excite your penis, climb the career ladder. We are the mothers, wives, sisters, daughters of these United States.
So alongside the pandemic, we also had a lot of societal upheaval going on. The current works that I have at Amos Eno Gallery here in Brooklyn are centered upon the act of marching. It's the simplest use of the physical body as a political force. I was researching the history of women-led marches, and I was considering the role of the individual within a demonstration. Vast numbers of clamorous bodies in motion translate to a robust show of strength and determination. However, eventually the individual goes home to their daily existence, and when the protest is over and the pussy hats are put away and the signs are disposed of and costumes packed up, is political activism embraced as an ongoing individual practice. Figurative artworks with minimized or non-existent facial features convey the individual subsumed by the larger group. Compositionally, these feminine bodies reflect the varying tempos and pauses of a demonstration, and thus they illustrate the visual structure of marching. My nude figures exude vulnerability, yet defiance. And furthermore, they allude to art historical images of partially nude women representing political ideology. In the words of Beyonce, who inspired this series, okay, ladies, now let's get in formation. I'd like to thank the College of Arts and Letters at Northern Arizona University and David Van Ness. If you like what you see, please keep in touch. If you go to my website, you can subscribe to my monthly newsletter, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Hi everyone, and I thank the organizers of for our conference for giving me an opportunity to share my project here. And I'm Natasha Thogam, and I work as an assistant professor at the Indian Institute of Technology, Udaipur in India. And I'm also a graphic artist, and my presentation is on a on a part of my second art practice project. And there is a slight change in the title of my project. It's dynamic art, a graphic narrative in the form of a poem. So I'll just start my screen share, and then is it visible now? Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically this is the content of my presentation, and I begin by sharing my journey as an artist scholar or a scholar artist, whichever you may prefer to use. So I'm a research scholar from India's northeast region, and I'm working on the literary and gender issues of this region, and this particular place is characterized by militarization, state violence, and where violence is sort of an everyday event there. It constitutes the everyday lives of the people of this region. So belonging to one of the state in this region, Manipur, and growing up with everyday violence, writing poetry and drawing, they were the only self-expressive outlet available for me to grapple with and negotiate such traumatic childhood experiences. So apart from two poems published in an anthology in 2012, there were poetry contributions to school and college magazines. For my other vocation, engagement ranged from participation in state and national level painting competitions to doing illustration work for the magazines in my colleges. And among art workshops attended, the most recent was on an art form from a southern state in India, Andhra Pradesh, Kalamkari art. And in this particular workshop was organized by Stigmate Society of India, a society which works for the upliftment of folk art forms in India. And I'm also currently taking online art courses offered through EDX, Coursera, and TEDx. And my first art practice project was with Zuban Publishers India and Sasakawa Peace Foundation Japan. And the output of this particular project was in the form of a graphic narrative. And that graphic narrative marks my formal entry into the world of graphic artists, and I had also written a poem on the evolution of artists in me, weaving a story of my paintings and drawings, similar to what Rosemary had done, but not exactly, but in a way, sort of linking a poem with my artwork. And so yeah, I have written a poem on the evolution of the artist in me, weaving a story of my paintings and drawings, which I did from 1994 to 2009. Yes, you can see, this sort of slideshow is video is sort of showing, my various artworks at different point of time, and yet my poetry and my artwork, the painting, sketches, or drawings, they remain separate from each other. And in this project, I attempt to fuse them together to create what I had termed as endemic art, that brings together the two genres of poetry and comics or graphic narratives. And furthermore, expanding on the political concerns of my research interests, which is on literary and gender studies of India's Northeast. My proposed project uses this fused form to explore the experiences of various women in India during the present pandemic. So now I'll talk about this current project. So my current project is an artist scholar or a scholar artist's way of coming to terms with a pandemic that has recently locked in, out, and down all peoples of our world. Inspired by William Blake's visual poetry, my poem will expand the boundaries of his form. For Blake, his artwork would often illustrate and illuminate his poetry. In contrast, for me, the visual image is inseparable from the verbal written text. Thus, in this project, I create a graphic narrative in the form of a poem responding to the pandemic lockdown in India, while simultaneously drawing from the gendered experiences of its various women. So yeah, I have certain resonances with Sarah here, with gender concern, and then also with Rosemary too. Currently, the global pandemic revealed the failure of many welfare states, including India, towards a term, which I have borrowed from the scholar Partha Chatterjee, quote unquote, population groups. Simultaneously, the lockdowns accompanying the pandemic were imposed in the most undemocratic manner. And in 2004, Partha Chatterjee, he once asserted, I'm quoting him here, that democracy is not government of, by, and for the people, but rather, quote, the politics of the governed. So this quote is from his book, The Politics of the Governed, Reflections on Popular Politics in Most of the World. Now, can this assertion still hold good today with the incidence of state repression against dissent? And I'm specifically talking in the context of India here. Domestic violence against women, it's a more generic kind of experience. Indifference to the plight of the migrants and discrimination against minorities, be it a Muslim or Dalit. They are people who belong to the lowest caste in this Indian system of caste system, and or a person belonging to India's Northeast. So there are certain kind of discrimination faced by people coming from India's Northeast region because of the way they look, the way we look, the way the Mongolian feature, which is different from the idea of how an Indian should look, that kind of thing. Now, artists the world over give an expression to these gendered experiences through songs, photographs, poems, cartoons, videos, plays and opinion write-ups as social media posts, essays, or news articles. I do it through a graphic narrative written in the form of 100 stanza poem. The fused form of this project is not new in the context of comics or graphic narratives, yet its novelty lies in the inversions of conventions of graphic narrative, conventions of language and grammar, and painting, as well as the inverse use of political terms used in this project. And this is the structure of my graphic poem. My poem is on the current pandemic has 5 parts or sections. The first section is on the gendered experiences of what I call quote unquote common women in India. The second is on the racist and gendered experiences of women migrants from India's northeast. The third is on women student activists in India. Fourth, on the self-expression of various women artists in India. And finally, the poetic persona, the woman artist's experience, the poetic persona sharing her own experience. Or should I say, my own experience. Now we move to the exhibition part of this presentation. So the following slides exhibit the 16 panels of the first part or the first section on the experiences of common women in India. And this is the description of this, you can call it something like a cover panel. So there are 3 outlines of what I had imagined as this female generative symbol or the yoni, which is shaped as an inverted triangle, placed one under the other. Each triangle is tapering in size, and each of them contains eye in a different background color. So there is this tension between the visual and the written word here. The visual image is in opposition to the verbal written text. Text is imposing or trying to contain everything through the use of this common this term, this word called common, trying to include everything within it. And then the images are doing the opposite. It's showing difference and difference in various ways. Then this is stanza 1, and I provide a description of this panel. So there are 2 stick figures of 2 women, the other she and the one she. The other she is on the balcony of a house, watering a flower, while the one she is sweeping outside the gates. Then next is stanza 2. This is a description of this panel. 2 heads representing the 2 women speak these words, and in the background there are a fly-infested broom and a drooping flower, symbolic of death, decay, and regeneration. Now we have stanza 3. It shows that the 2 heads have returned and they are speaking with one another. A rectangular boundary represents the house and the home, the various version of a place, shelter, a place that they inhabit. Slide 10, we move to stanza 4. I describe it thus, So these words are written with a picture showing a closed palm inside the female, sex symbol in the Greek script, which is considered a symbol of feminism also. So Simone de Beauvoir and Judith Butler are involved in these lines through the use of the 2 terms born and perform. Then there is stanza 5, where one she appears and speaks these words, and there's this she uses this she is sort of, uh, 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 putting out a clarion call of the need to survive, through the use of this, acronym SOS, kind of, so that the acronym for survival, save our soul, literally. Then stanza 6, one she continues, and the panel shows the most common image of a refugee returning home during the pandemic. I'm using the term refugee in a very deliberate manner, and in the next stanza, an explanation of why it's being used would be sort of elaborate. So it is in a it is invoked using a stick figure, and it is an uphill journey, and the text merges with the image here again, and to indicate this uphill kind of a journey. Then stanza 7 also has the one she's speaking. Here too, the merging of the text and the image continues. The word hunger is on a plate, while the word thirst is written on a glass tumbler, and then there is a pun in the use of the word states here. A refugee can go to all states and any state, and yet he or she belongs to none. In stanza 8, another provocative image of the pandemic in India. I'm just going to, after the end of this particular presentation, I'll share a video of an incident where in a railway station where a child is trying to wake up his dead mother. It's sort of shown here. So this image is again shown in stick figures, and there is hope in using the phrase "wakes me up" because it's as if the child has woken me up, opened my eyes in the sense of a certain kind of a realization, and the child is not trying but rather has done so, and the me here stands for all the eyes in the world, and it stands for none and as well as everybody. Stanza 9 shows the other she. Other she is represented with a head, the head used for one and the other she. They are inverted many times, making it difficult to recognize the fact that they are different. So in terms of appearances, they are indistinguishable and represented as same, yet their experiences aren't. One she survives, seen in the use of the acronym SOS, while the other she lives. Please notice that the hair is represented in such a manner that it appears to be part of a speech bubble, in comics or graphic narrative. We have here stanza 10, an image reminding of a travesty by the Indian state. Right? It talks about two incidents where there was this call, in the early stages of the when the pandemic started in India. There was an event organized by the Indian government, where at a particular point of time, everybody in India should be, it was probably I think 9 p.m. or something. Everybody should be beating their utensils in their houses. Okay, and I really don't know, and that particular incident was called the Janta curfew. And then another event which was organized on a country level was the blackout day. So on a particular day, the whole country was at a particular point, at a particular time, the whole country was supposed to sort of switch off all their lights in their homes at night. So these two incidents, I consider it as a travesty because of how the leaders sort of make a politics out of suffering of people. So that's why I would call it a travesty. Now here in this scene, the other she speaks and she does not have to walk miles to reach her house. She's in the house itself. She is inside the house, but she is not happy. Shown from that emoji with the downturned lips there. The letter I and the speaking other woman are put together in a house to indicate an identification between the two. Then this is stanza 11, where the sad other she continues speaking. So I have a wheat plant to represent food and a river to represent water, and the other she speaks this word. So here the image becomes the text when the wheat plant is drawn like the letter H, and the river grows a tail to show the letter T. Then stanza 12 imagines a replication of that the earlier image, the railway station scene of stanza 8. But there is a certain difference, and there is also a certain kind of inversion of how to read, so that the text is to be read from down to up, and an instruction is also added here. And in stanza 13, the artist persona appears as an eye. And here we have a picture of a big eye between the two she's, represented by the two heads. And the eye is the speaking figure between the two of them. Then stanza 14 shows how the image merges into the text with the first letter or word of this sentence. And we have a magnifying glass representing a quest or a search, and the function of this glass is sort of highlighted. It magnifies the pathos as well as makes others see more clearly. So the two functions of magnifying glass is sort of highlighted through this representation. Now, the last stanza of this particular part of my poem, or this particular section, is stanza 15, and it is another instance of the text merging with the image. And the eye is represented by this figure again. And in a conflict-torn place, violence is everyday life, where the children of the place die every day. So the artist is from the artist persona is from a conflict-torn place in India's northeast, and she shares her experience of everyday violence here. And before I move to a more demonstration of this inversion of grammar forms and conventions, I like to add a little general note on this particular whole section. So the head of the other she shows her sorrow, okay, and how do we know it from that the mouth being sort of downturned, but the one she has visible evidence of her sorrow. So while the other she has to show her sorrow, and the other she is sort of conditioned not to do so, and conditioned by the society that she lived in. And here I invoke the scholar Rajeshwari Sundarajan and her concept of the real and imagined women. So for Sundarajan, imagined women are the women represented in media and popular culture who have no semblance with experiences of women in real life. And I'm talking more specifically in the context of India, and representation in the soaps and the daily dramas and the various television dramas that people consume in India. And in contrast, women are represented in a feminist text, according to Sundarajan, are closer to real life, and she calls them as real women. So expanding on that, and imagine women is a custodian of the Indian middle class ideology, and she is conditioned to hide her sorrow and live a life of sacrificing for others, especially her family. Now, the other she that I'm representing and I'm showing here is a real one, and who is showing what she feels and showing it, I am representing it through that, the emoticon of a downturned mouth. So now I move to the last part of my presentation where
Mikasa, I need to cut in.
I'm just ending. This is the last.
Okay, be quick, please.
Okay, so so in this particular part, I talk about inversions. So I'll speak of. Okay, so then I'll talk about two kinds of inversion that I'm sort of engaging here. So in this whole spatial logic, when first the first point that I would like to bring out is an inversion of a grammatical rule or violation C. So if you can see, in this particular image, when you use other this word other as the other as a determiner, grammatically, it's according to a Cambridge dictionary, if you use other before a singular countable noun, we must use another determiner here, one before it. But here I've sort of inverted that convention by using the other before the one, and then within the spatial logic of this particular panel, you can see that the word spoken by the one she appears before the word spoken by the other she. But but so how would you read the order of the poem? Okay, so the I mean, in terms of the spatial logic, the words of the I mean, how to understand the spatial logic? Should we read it from left to right, or up to down? But the ordering is sort of it's a mess kind of a thing. Then another is this categorization. Okay, so the use of other she. So this inversion has when I use the other she before the one she, I'm not only inverting a grammatical rule, but I'm also this also has a very political implication of a hierarchical certain kind of hierarchy. There is a certain kind of hierarchy which I'm trying to dismantle here. So this inversion has political implication too, where a certain hierarchy of addressing the dominant before the other is dismantled or inverted. When the dominant she becomes the other, while the other becomes the one. So the idea of categorizing dominant and other for analytical purposes is common in most academic writing. And so I invoke the scholar Shamila Srikumar here for her, and she was writing in the context of Malayali women from the southern state of Kerala in India. And so these dominant women, they are privileged in terms of class and caste in relation to what she would term as the other women. And here I have tried to sort of invert this categorization. When the two she's become indistinguishable in their visual representation, then even the binary relation between the two gets resolved. So so also there is also an inversion of the comic convention. I am using a thought bubble in place of I'm using a thought bubble for a speech or a speaking act on the part of one of these characters. So as mentioned previously, the visual image is inseparable from the written text, and this is this is also demonstrated on the sample panel when the image complements the written text in forming the bubble. And so yeah, basically the simultaneity of the written text with the image is sort of highlighted. So yeah, I think with this I shall end my presentation. Thank you.
So next I have Kathleen Reber, is that right? From NEU, talking about their theater project.
McGeever.
Geever.
And I am joined by my colleague on this project, Bobby Eccleston in nursing. And
hello.
So we're going to jump right in, but let me pull up let me share screen and pull up our presentation. And hopefully everything will work out well. Slideshow from beginning. There we go. So welcome everybody. We're going to shift gears here a little bit, and we're combining medicine practice training with theater, and it's called health theater or healthcare theater also. We are revisioning what that STEAM collaboration is. I'll introduce myself, and then Bobby can introduce himself. I am chair and professor of performance here at NAU, and I have been in the Department of Theater, running the department as chair for 14 years, and I spent 2 years here prior as a visiting assistant professor at the beginning of my career. So Bobby.
Hello, I'm Bobby Eccleston. I work in the School of Nursing. I'm actually the simulation coordinator, and that's basically kind of my specialty right now, is I teach with simulation modalities. And this healthcare theater or health theater is pretty much my first foray into standardized participants, which is what we're about to dive into. But I've been with NAU 10 years now.
All right, so we'll jump in.
Go
ahead, Bobby.
Do you want me to take this one?
Yeah.
We do want to specifically do a shout out to Northern Arizona Healthcare Foundation. They are actually the grantee or the grantor that has funded the creation, development, and rollout of this course. So, and if Kathleen has anything to add to that, sorry.
No, I'm just so thankful. I helped do a little edit, but really writing this wonderful grant was all in Bobby's court. So we'll keep going because we know that we only have our 20 minutes. But so what is this thing that we're doing? I pulled this from our proposal to present to you all, but I think by the end of our presentation, you'll have a better idea. And given we're a little bit behind, I think you can read that. And but just to give you a nutshell, basically, when students in nursing in particular, because that's who we're working with, but learners in lots of areas need to have real life, as real as possible, practices with what they're doing. It's important to have the humanity. They can only learn so much in nursing, for example, with the mannequin, which are really cool, by the way, but they need the humanity. So Bobby came to me, and we are moving full steam, combining these learning modalities with live people, and they are performers. And we'll dive in from there. Do you need to add anything, Bobby, there?
No, I think as we dive in, it should become more clear, hopefully. But yeah.
Cool. Good. So this slide will give you a little bit of, or the things we're going to talk about, a little bit of idea. So I gave you the class will join nursing students to start and theater students. But as we've learned, we just spent, Bobby and I, 3 days with consultants to help us to develop this program. But one of the things that they shared with us is that actually your student base grows, and students all over campus end up taking this class because it's not only fun, it's really a really interesting dive into empathy and what humanity is. But the class itself, the structure of the class, to jump to the last bullet point, is that there's a certain amount of didactic stuff that goes on talking. We'll go into some of this a little bit later, but you know, how do you respond? How do we create character? How do we what is even the structure of this whole event, this process? And then the practice part, which is the actual simulations, where the SPs, we call them, and that stands for standardized participant. It can also be standardized patient in other areas, but we use the term participant because it's not just the patient, it's the family member, it's other people involved in that specific learning experience. And this is driven by goals and learning outcomes for the student. For example, there might be a goal for the nursing student to practice therapeutic communication. And Bobby can explain that better, but we've got some slides later. But so we will develop that story around that, and they will actually bring it to life. And it is very real for the students. So we're gonna, how was this idea born? And then Bobby, if you could take the first one, because that's your area, and then I'll bring it back to why this COVID, why did COVID make this possible? Go ahead, Bobby.
So how the idea was born, this is actually pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, back in the summer, I think August of 2019, a colleague, Garrett Mitchell, and I traveled down to Phoenix for a conference, kind of like an educational event. And one of the parts of the presentation, it was a person that works still for the University of Delaware. It's a nursing faculty. They basically were presenting on the development of this healthcare theater course. So I think they deserve the original credit for the idea in terms of, you know, the developing it and rolling it out. And now they're, luckily for us, they're more than happy to, you know, share and spread the idea and try to get the idea going. The big advantage to this is, and the big struggle, and I'll relate it to the struggle that we've had in our nursing program, is access to standardized participants can be quite expensive. The advantage to this course is we both get the benefit of access to SPs that are very affordable, if not free, but then also the students get real life training, real life education, and a real life experience in performance of an SP. So whether that's a theater student, you know, literally learning a potential career path, or a nursing student getting into that empathy part of, you know, what it's like to be a patient. So that's kind of the foundation of where this idea was born. And we love the idea, and we kind of were looking for opportunities to develop it. And then COVID happened, and we found ourselves with a lot of time. So I'll let Kathleen take over.
Yeah, and from a theater's perspective, and being the chair of the theater department, and those of you that maybe don't have theater background in an academic institution, the chair acts as an artistic director, as well as an executive director, as well as a regular administrator and a faculty member. So your life is spinning plates. And so I think it was really lovely, and the synergy of it is even deeper than that, because I've been working with, personally with a medical school here on the mountain, and doing what they call OSCE simulated patients, OSCE sims. And those those are about testing medical students. And so they're very rigid. But I've been thinking how, for a long time, how this could be expanded into more of the empathy and the creation of the humanity, the character, the real person. And so it was really synergetic on many, many levels, because COVID did give me the time to put those plates down. I wasn't spinning them. And at the same time, Bobby reached out to myself and my associate dean, and then the conversation just started happening. At the same time, our national organization has been really pulling into this area, because as we'll talk at the very end, this is a big field that is growing field, and it is a job for students beyond here, employment, and they can make a difference. So COVID was, I think, instrumental for making this happen. It would be very easy to say, no, I don't have the time.
Yeah.
So, and then the grant.
Cool. So yeah, the grant itself, we applied the summer of 2020 was when kind of the grant process was going. Specifically, we did ask for a 2-year project. So, knowing that we wouldn't probably be able to develop a course in just 1 academic year, we knew we'd probably need the time for 2. So we did apply as a 2-year. So that's kind of like the scope in terms of time. In terms of the course itself, we do have a goal, and hopefully we, as things work out, this course can be run both in the fall and the spring semester. So we kind of have a sustainable source of SPs that we can use both for in the nursing education realm and also in our community as well. There is a community scope to this, and specifically for the initial 2 years, we do have a focus on the behavioral health realm. That's what the Northern Arizona Healthcare Foundation, that's kind of like their focus for this latest grant cycle. And so that's, again, SPs lend themselves to that in more ways than, you could measure, especially compared to a mannequin, if you're using a mannequin for a simulation, for instance. Just the nonverbal communication alone, you don't get that from a mannequin. So you absolutely need a human for that. Does that kind of cover the areas you needed me to, Kathleen?
Yeah.
I kind of want to be mindful of our time as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to move forward, and this next slide is long, so maybe we can go through it quickly. Give a brief, if you could give a brief history of simulations, but maybe we've already done some of that, so maybe just wrap that up, and then we'll get into the other things.
Yes, so very quickly, so some of the history of simulations, really the base of a lot of like the science and data driven part of simulation actually came out of both the military side of things as well as flight simulation. So that's kind of the basis where a lot of the science was established, and the healthcare realm essentially borrowed from there to begin with. And, of course, since then we've developed our own standards and things like that. So that's kind of a brief history. For the simulations themselves, why we do simulations in general, but especially trying to relate it back to the use of SPs, safety is the biggest part of this. As you can imagine, being a brand new or even like a couple semesters in nursing student, approaching a patient who's actually ill, actually needs help, could actually be harmed if that help is provided improperly, versus practicing that in a simulation lab where nobody's going to be able to get hurt, both a patient nor the student. So safety is probably the biggest part of simulation, and we actually point that out specifically to the students. We highlight the safety, both their physical safety, psychological safety, even spiritual safety. Then, of course, the voice of the patient, that relates back to the SPs specifically, because again, they can portray an actual human versus just a mannequin with the human voice behind it. The SP can do all of the things that humans can do that mannequins can't. So the scenario sims characters, what we want to highlight there is all of these can be basically targeted to the student's learning needs. So versus something in like a clinical setting in a hospital, you may not ever see a certain disease process or diagnosis or anything, but in simulation you can force that. You can create that patient with that disease process and be able to give your students that experience that they otherwise wouldn't have. For the participants,
Before
oh,
we
sorry,
go
go ahead, Kathleen.
Before we go on, I'd like to highlight the characters, because on the theatrical side, these are really well developed characters. They have an extensive backstory that brings that patient up to, or that family member up to the moment of the sim. And that is highlighted as so important to make it as real as possible. Keep going.
Yep. Oh, thank you for highlighting that character part of it. For the participants, so that's mainly referring to, that could be anyone from the community to our students themselves, or even ourselves as faculty. We consider definitely ourselves as participants, definitely the SPs as participants in the sims. But what we like to look at there is basically everyone who's going to benefit from this sim occurring. And as faculty, we benefit just as much as our students. We learn as much as they do in terms of, learning approaches, things like that, communication techniques. But and then for the learner specifically, again, all of our sims that we currently do are 100% focused on the learning outcomes, learning benefit to those learners themselves. So we call those formative simulations versus like a test, which would be a summative simulation. And then the final note, did you need me to cover that too, Kathleen?
Yeah, there's specific learning outcomes for each of the learners, but I think we already have covered that. So, and in fact, in the essence of time, and to help the people after us, I think that we may have already covered this slide as well. And the video is awfully long. I was only going to show a portion of it, but I think the thing to take away from here is the feedback. Feedback and not evaluation is an amazingly important step in this process. So we will teach the students how to give the feedback from the patient's perspective, but it's also, we're not, the SPs are not tools. In other words, they are an essential part of the learning process. And so we really stress that in this whole environment. So I think we've talked about this for a little bit, but I would like, and I know we're running short, but I think this video is fun, and if it'll play, it kind of brings home the idea that what Bobby has already stressed about why plastic over people, or people over plastic. Whoops, sorry. Hopefully it'll show. If it doesn't, aha, here we go.
I don't think it's working, Kathleen.
So on your share screen, you want to share the YouTube potentially.
You couldn't hear it, right?
No, it wasn't playing.
Ah, I never learned that deal. Okay. Well, you could see it, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to go back. Obviously, I think it's, let me just show this though. I think it's funny to see the difference. Here we have the group, the live people, and then we have the plastic people. And the thing, you can't see that either, right?
No. Yeah, we can only see the PowerPoint.
What I hope to do is be able to, maybe I could host this video when I document this conference.
That'd be great, because I don't want to, the whole point, we have, that's too bad, because this actor is amazing. He plays a CP patient. And so that's what I was afraid of. I have not mastered the Zoom yet after a year and a half or however long it's been to get it to play. And I tried and it did at home. So, but the whole idea is that the plastic can't respond. And the young man in this particular video got CP and cerebral palsy. And it's an actor, he's amazing. But he, just the waiting for him to get across the room and all of that. And so when you have and the commotion and how that's distracting for this young patient. And then the people switch to mannequins everywhere, and it's just like crickets. The really cool thing is that just to add an anecdote, when this is on YouTube, and when people were saying, "Oh, bless his heart, that young man going to college with all those things," it truly is an actor. So that's lovely. So I don't know if I can do this, but maybe you can add these simulations videos as well to the recording, David. I'm not sure, but these are really cool. They show the backstory, and I'm afraid, with maybe a minute left or whatever, I'm not going to be able to pull it up for you all, but please check it out. You can see Mildred's backstory, which is really complex. The character scenarios are named after the patient or the family member in some instances, but this backstory is what the actors need, what the SPs need to create a full character. And also, and you can chime in here, Bobby, the really key important thing is that we are creating a standardized experience. Now, within that, there is nuance, but that standardized experience is important for the learner and for the learning outcomes that you're expecting. So the detail is immense in each of the characters. And then the playing of the character is very real. Do you want to share anything about that, Bobby?
Yeah, and just kind of another way to put that is, you could have one actor playing, the character patient, and then on a different day, a totally different actor. But the standardization just hopefully ensures that both two different learner groups, even though they had two different actors playing that same character patient, that SP, they will still come away with that sim with the same learning outcomes, the same learning experience. So that's kind of, another way to put standardization across the SPs that we use and the characters that we developed.
So very quickly, we've talked a lot about the how it helps the nursing student, but this is a true benefit for the theater performance student. In-depth character development, honesty, realism, research and performance, direct feedback from the experience to whether what they're doing is working. Empathetic learning, which we do in theater all the time, is heightened to an extreme degree. Potential employment, which is always the question in the arts sometimes, but there is a job to be had doing this, which is why we're creating this, because some of these centers that the simulation are very expensive, not just the mannequins, but the people. And they make a difference in a way that is beyond what we know theater does, make a difference in the world, but it makes a difference in a real, tangible, hands-on way. They can see that they are giving the patient voice, and that maybe they're affecting healthcare when they're old and need somebody in a healthcare facility, or when they're sick and they need somebody in a healthcare facility, et cetera, or their parents or their friends. So it's huge. And take a moment, and Bobby, I think, because we are short on time, if you want to talk about the experience, I think that real world, that last bullet, because the story you've told me over and over about the students' reaction to the Sims is very powerful.
Yes, very quickly, we've run SP Sims in the past when we've had, volunteers. And just an example, we had one that was a suicidal ideation. The students began interacting, taking care of this SP. By the time I had to end the sim, the students were actually dialing the suicide hotline because they actually believed the SP actor was suicidal, and they were reaching out for further resources and help. So we had to end the sim because obviously we didn't want to call to the suicide hotline for a education event. But that's how real it felt to those students. They actually were reaching out for further resources and help to help this patient that was actually an actor. So that's just a quick story.
And I think I'm going to skip this one and go to this slide or the Wild West. Either way, actually we'll go to the Wild West, Wild West. I'm using a quote from Avkin, so we can finish off here. There are so many potential partnerships. Yes, we are medicine, nursing based right now, and also in particular, mental health or behavioral health rather, sorry. I'm learning so many medical terms. It's been phenomenal already. But other medical professions, law, criminal justice, hotel restaurant management, veterinary, EDI work. Can you throw something in as our last thought? Because I'm getting the flash from David.
Yeah, and actually one real partnership we're currently pursuing is helping out the Arizona Crisis Response Network. So they're going to be, hopefully we'll be able to help provide some SPs to help train and educate their employees so that they can be more effective crisis line operators.
So in quick closing, and we don't have time for questions, so direct them in the chat and then David can direct them to Bobby and I. But I don't think this would have been possible without COVID, just given the nature of on my side of the pace that we live in the university in the theater program. So thank you very much, and a quick introduction.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you, Bobby. Next, I have Pato Hebert, who is going to finish out our day for us.
Thanks, David. I want to congratulate you and thank you and all the organizing team. I know it's a ton of work to bring people together like this, and really very grateful to be here. My name is Pato Hebert. I'm a visual artist and an organizer, and I serve as the chair of the Department of Art and Public Policy at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. I'm also what's commonly known as a COVID long hauler. So I've been sick since last March 2020, and today I'd like to do an illustrative performative reading, sharing 3 pieces of writing from my journey with COVID and my different stages over the last year, along with a body of photographs that I've made called the Lingering series. And I think, as you'll soon see, it seems perhaps apropos for Earth Day. Let me see if I can pull up the show. Okay. So I tested on March 24th, 2020, and I got the results on the 27th. And I, told my family and my closest friends. And then the next day on March 28th, I went public via social media, in part because I have a long background as an HIV organizer and know the importance of opening space to talk about illness and hold space for living with challenges. And also because there was still so much, I think, unfamiliarity, uncertainty, confusion, and stigma around the coronavirus. So I'll start with the post from March 28th. Lisa Marie, it looks like you may need to mute. Yesterday, I received a call telling me that I tested positive for the COVID-19 virus. Ever the artist, here are photos of me and the mask they gave me on Tuesday as I pulled into the parking lot for my test before I knew the outcome. I'm sharing to help counter the stigma of this virus, to ground it and to make it real, to remember that care can look and feel like so many different things, and that right now we must summon them all in our fragile, magnificent world. This is a copy of the paper test results that came some 3 weeks later in the mail. I feel great rage, if no surprise, that the federal government responses have been deadly slow and inadequate, that our healthcare providers and caregivers and grocery store workers are so under-supported and imperiled, that testing and the most basic of epi responses are only now slowly beginning to ramp up, that profits have been prioritized over people and the planet, that health necessities and food are considered commodities, that our leadership still doesn't understand that healthcare is a human right. It cannot be tied to employment or the market, that our people on the inside are at great risk, that our people without shelter are so vulnerable, that childcare and elder care are not valued, resourced, and prioritized, that so many people are now without work and food or will soon be, These gaps in funding and resources are by design. Some of us have been surviving them for centuries. It does not have to be this way. So I'm also moved by all of the amazing community organizing afoot, our interpersonal, local, regional, national, and transnational systems of mutual care. We have to keep cultivating and expanding these care networks in all the ways that we can, and heard beautiful examples of that, I have to say, in the other room. There's so many great programs as part of this conference, but looking at Native communities' responses, particularly in the Southwest, and the incredible ways that people mobilize to care for one another. I'm grateful for folks who are doing the work on the daily and stepping into and channeling their powers right now. I'm also writing to tell you that I love you and that I want you and yours to be well, to embrace joy and the important things, to live as we always have in our shared work together, with consciousness, consideration, critical thinking, compassion, and care. This time will pass, and we will be both diminished and stronger for it. We will also be changed. I already am. With today's rising sun, I ask that I might have the gift of slowly continuing to evolve into my better self, more mindful of my selfishness and ego, greed and fear, ignorance and weakness, wobbly courage, wavering certainty, blessed potential, sacred breath. I clear the bits of phlegm from my throat and open my lungs to it all, embracing that nothing's reassured. But unlike so many others, too many thousands upon thousands of others, I'll likely be fine. I'm home and I'm safe in LA. I have no fever. I've got plenty of groceries and provisions, only very minor cold flu symptoms, a Monday afternoon phone consult with a primary care physician just to be connected to medical care, surrounded by love and support, and I live 4 blocks from a hospital. So do not worry about me. Instead, please practice renewed generosity, sharing in new and sometimes uncomfortable ways, principles of mutual and self-care, love, and be gentle with yourselves as the work around us intensifies and exhausts. So I was tested in a large urban park called Elysian Park that's in the center of Los Angeles. And it's also where I returned as part of a walking practice, as part of my healing, and began photographing our marks on this incredible place, this incredible, beautiful resource of an open public space, free and accessible to all. I closed that initial social media post from last March with, I am diseased and well, fragile and strong, laughing and quiet, vulnerable and resilient, radiant and unsure, loving and loved. May you be loved and loving too. So as I just read, initially I thought, okay, I'm good. Like minor flu, I guess I got really fortunate. Maybe I'm gonna be just fine. And I didn't want people to worry about me. And of course I didn't want to be worried. And within a week of that post, I was in urgent care, struggling to breathe. And I'm very fortunate that I never had to be hospitalized or intubated, put on oxygen, entering the ICU. But I've been to urgent care a couple of times for GI issues and the breathing. And just yesterday, I was seeing my neurologist for a follow-up. I was in acupuncture on Tuesday, and I have to deal with a gastroenterologist in the coming weeks. I didn't know any of that at the time when I wrote in late March. I thought I would be good, last late March, I should say. And then things really began to change in April and got much, much more difficult. And it turns out that, of course, many people were beginning to experience what we now know as long hauling, that the symptoms didn't just go away and you didn't just quote unquote return to an ableist well after 2 or 3 weeks, and that things could unfold in very complicated and challenging, unpredictable and exhausting ways. And I'm fortunate because I have an old friend named Alexandra Juhas, who is also an activist and an artist, and she's a professor of media studies and feminism. And she reached out going through her own long hauling process. And in April said, I want us to try to write about this together. I saw your posts, and I think it's really important that we tell the story of what we're going through and try to begin to put language and image to this time, this early time in the pandemic. And so last spring, we began to write together. And the piece then came out in Balm in July. So we're now at that point about 4, 5, 6 months into the epidemic, then a pandemic in the US. And this piece was called You're Still Sick, because we kept having people say to us in April and May, oh, I thought you got infected in March. Aren't you better yet? You're still sick. And it was very well intended and loving and undergirded with tons of concern. But there wasn't a framework yet for understanding why it is that people just didn't bounce back all out the flu. I mean, if you weren't in the hospital, everything should be okay. And that refrain was both caring and exhausting for us. So we used it as the title for the piece. So I'm going to share some joint writing that we did in concert with the beginning of this series I told you about, the Lingering series. And one of the images that really began to call to me was seeing a mask suspended in this dried spring flower bramble. And where we see the blue here looked so much to me like the coronavirus itself, this field of viruses with this lone mask that had somehow made its way down the hill, been blown there or something, and had landed in suspense in the bramble. So Alex and I say, science is only beginning to learn what we have been living, just how complex and uneven recovering with COVID-19 can be. Recovering, a process, ongoing, so different from that shifting beacon of being already recovered. With COVID, it seems that sometimes there is no easy past tense, only a long and frustrating lingering. This means living with the virus's episodic and unsettling resurgence. Trust and optimism easily erode here. Confusion reigns in this dispiriting place and time of coronavirus recovering. Health feels unfinished, uncertain, incomplete. This is a different kind of flattening. So much talk of spikes, surges, waves, plateaus, hotspots, curves. Just as regions and cities are now in varying stages of opening up, often only to close back down, we, the infected, are in various states of recovering. The country is nowhere near fully reopened, and we are nowhere near fully recovered. Instead, we live in a messy and ambiguous unfolding. When you're afflicted with COVID-19, all of your corporeal compasses can skew. The virus and your human response to it makes it hard to know whether what you're feeling is allergies or a mere cold, psychosomatic, or the very real effects of stress. This becomes particularly disorienting when you suffer through clear symptoms that eventually recede, only to reemerge. We've found that learning from each other, listening to each other, having our symptoms reflected and augmented by those expressed by another, are all forms of confirmation more validating than any test, which is a reference to how difficult it was at the time, and sometimes still, for people just to get a test to find out if what they were feeling in their body was actually registering through science. COVID-19 sufferers find buddies to authenticate our lived experiences and what is patently true in our bodies. Daily, seemingly unceasing stresses and previously unfelt assaults. This is again speaking to last year, 2020. In early March, I had a sore throat, sneezing, a cough with phlegm, not dry. At the time, these were deemed signs that I was not infected with COVID. How little we knew, how much I would learn. Soon sleep unfriended me, no matter how much NyQuil or melatonin I offered in seduction and supplication. By April, I stopped taking sleep aids because they made one part of me stumble toward collapse while my lungs clenched toward constriction. Late at night, I'd be yanked between these extremes, needing desperately to sleep, but unable to because my body anxiously wanted to breathe freely. In the bed, I developed elaborate positions on my side, with my head elevated on multiple pillows, spine extended straight toward my feet, a cushion between knees, free arm propped on hip away from weighing on lungs, torso torqued to the ceiling, all in hopes of inviting an open passage of air. I was exhausted during the day, and I dreaded the night. In spring, my emotional watershed was reconfigured. I cried more than ever, weeps into sobs, into hiccups, into hopelessness. Patience, compassion, empathy, and generosity feel harder to come by now, for self, toward others, I'm regularly frustrated, too tired to be enraged. Doubt is pervasive, trust beleaguered. Incessant, even my biological belly is a cauldron. I've had ongoing and uncomfortable gastrointestinal issues, incessant bloating and gas, a few moments of diarrhea, daily bouts of inflammation, especially after any bits of sugar or gluten. On various nights, dispersed across several weeks, my gut wrenched with the telltale signs of food poisoning. It was COVID. And here is an image of a coyote who's just crossed the road at dusk. There have been neurological logjams as well. Focus, motivation, and cognizance have all been adversely affected. Short-term memory can be a struggle. Trying to summarize what happened last week, or even last night. Thoughts slide off the road and into the COVID fog. Word recall gets jumbled too. I can see a few letters, hear some sounds, but not enough of a Scrabble word to play from the scramble. Once, in mid-June, I tried to order mapo tofu for my partner. It came out Maputo, the capital of Mozambique, where I was scheduled to contribute to a global HIV prevention summit in late March. That historic gathering of activists was canceled due to COVID. Sometimes it feels like my mental dexterity has been too. This unevenness is distressing. Old symptoms come back to say hi again. The chest compressed as cortisol courses after a nightmare about street fighting with metal poles during the uprising. These symptomatic spasms add to COVID-19's emotional and psychic stress, its emergent and persistent scars. So that again was writing from last spring and early summer that was released publicly in midsummer. And the last piece of writing I'll share with you is from my social media post from this March 2nd, 2021, which was the 1-year anniversary of my first symptom, that sore throat that I wasn't initially worried about because it wasn't initially understood as a symptom of COVID. I will probably never know when or where I got infected. Beyond my epidemiological geekery, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that the president was busy being flippant and racist, obsessed with the wrong campaign, the trail of narcissism. What matters is that public health infrastructure had been eroded for decades and was not properly in place. Profits for some prevailed over healthy possibilities for all. Resources and mobilization were slow or altogether absent. Intelligence downplayed, science undermined, messages muddled, dereliction of duty rampant. So there it appeared, 1 year ago today, my first symptom in the form of a sore throat. Guidelines didn't even consider it a sign of infection at the time, yet now, when I talk too long or get run down or give a presentation like this, the sore throats are still here. They serve as raw reminders, need their remedies, pronounce COVID's claim to the crown of resilience. I'm still here too, with small announcements, not quite my own. Seems strange to mark a 1-year relationship with the coronavirus, to make ongoing room for its impact on this body and being. But the Rona and I are hardly alone. Lots of us long haulers are coming up on our 1-year anniversaries of being sick, and scores of the infected aren't even here at all. In this country alone, more than 500,000 people didn't make it. Less euphemistically, they're dead. There's barely a day that someone I care about isn't telling me of a person in their life who's died from COVID. These dead, our dead, are disproportionately Latinx, Black, Indigenous and elders, working class and poor, papis, primas, tías, abuelas, madres, compas, hermanas, colegas, queridas, humanos, ya. It did not have to be this way, does not. I can make my offerings of thanks for being here, and I do, daily, at least as often as I cry, which I do all the time now thanks to COVID leaving me with a condition called pseudo-bulbar effect. My neurologist explained the condition to me, the diagnosis for all my puddles. She said, some people laugh like the Joker and others cry. Like La Llorona, I think, like me. I suppose this COVID symptom is also a syndrome, but I think of the tears as libations, and for me, they come most often in moments of wonder, appreciation, and joy. I can marvel at being able to take a walk or spend time with raptors. I can weep endlessly at your abundant generosity and love that sustain me, the communal currents of tenderness and care, the unearned privileges of ongoing healthcare and flexible work from home, the mystery of a body that's slowly better, if stubbornly not well, a body that does not quit. Yes, I can and should celebrate survival, feel hopeful at the arrival of vaccines, fret over us desperately needing them for more than just rich arms and nations. Hashtag People's Vaccine, which is a global mobilization to try to make vaccines accessible to everyone. But in my small and vital celebrations, I'm also minding the mourning and the reckoning to come. Forgive me if this makes me less than giddy. Like you, I'm tired and ready for a new world. But La Covida Loca ensures, which is the crazy life in Spanish, the COVID crazy life, that there's no forgetting or repressing or white knuckling it through. There's no racing ahead, ain't no skipping the line, and there's certainly no going back. There's only the slow and steady making of a more just now. I hope this is the now that endures, an equitable now in which everyone can thrive. I hope this is the glorious hard work that grows and flourishes in time. I hope this now is one of playful discovery together, as surely as COVID and I have had to learn how to share this body. I hope a year from now, we finally realize that we cannot just blast off to Mars or push COVID behind us, but we can dance with it as a way of being somewhere perhaps better. So this was again March 2nd, and it happened to be my father's birthday. So I wrote, "It's my pop's cumple today. He finally got his first vaccine last week. Mi madre went along to support him, hoping she could get one too, but she has to wait until next Saturday to get her first. I haven't been able to see them in a year. This is the last time I saw them, saying goodbye to them at the airport in March 2020. But the day is coming when I will safely hug them again, crack stupid jokes to make them laugh, spoil them as if to cast spells for more mañanas against all these months that have slipped down the COVID drain. One long year COVID, we be in it for the long haul, por vida, just to say for life. Thank you." David?
Thank you very much. So there's a little bit of time left. I know that there have been some questions for asking some questions. We do have a little bit of time for that, but I also, part of one of the sponsors of the program has asked that we fill out this feedback form when you can. It's linked in the chat. So if there's anybody who has questions for Pato or maybe some of the other presenters who might be still be here.
I think there have been some enduring themes of isolation and finding this need to reach out. I'd like to ask the most recent speaker, my apologies, your name is escaping me, but have you found support through COVID long haul groups? Is there a community that's formed in the US in the same way that we've kind of had them form in the UK?
Yeah, thank you, Ben. It's a beautiful question. And the t-shirt I'm wearing was part of a fundraiser for a group called Body Politic, which began as a queer feminist support community, excuse me, in New York City. And when many of their members got sick last March, they realized they needed to mobilize support for one another. And they set up a very elaborate Slack channel. And now there are thousands and thousands of people, long haulers and people living and working in solidarity with long haulers who are part of this long hauler community, including myself. I also signed up for 3 on Facebook. One of them was international and based in the UK. Amazing organizing has been happening in the UK. And now there are many, many, many. And there's beautiful cross-pollinating happening between very localized ways, like somebody I met through Instagram who mainly began to build digital community, but then co-developed on the ground group with somebody in Austin, Texas, for instance. So there is quite beautiful interplay happening. And of course, many organizations who pivoted the work they do around housing or school to prison pipelines or any number of other structural questions to dealing with COVID. And so there's been both support inside of communities of people living with COVID and also across all kinds of folks who are trying to imagine a different kind of wellness. I could say much more, but I want to pause in case you want to add or go back and forth on that.
Well, I was reminded. I mean, I've been working on COVID in the UK with King's College London as part of my day job, and in talking with some of the academic staff and clinical staff who themselves became long haul COVID sufferers, it kind of reminded me somewhat of the Dallas Buyers Club, and the expertise suddenly being turned to, well, this is what I actually feel like, and these people who are used to kind of waiting for medicine to catch up and waiting for supply chains to catch up and trying to understand from their own perspective and their own experience what they can do. And I don't know if that's something that you can speak to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's that brief moment in the second piece of writing, which, you know, I shared a lot, so it's hard to hold it all, but where Alex and I are talking about the exchange of ideas, particularly last spring and summer, or in any context where COVID is new-ish and the idea of long hauling is either new or unknown, it becomes really valuable for people to confirm with one another. As different as our bodily experiences can be, not everyone has the same symptoms or timelines or cycles, right, of feeling a little better and crashing. But in many places, especially in the first year, you couldn't even get a test. And of course, that's true in huge swaths of the world and many parts of the global north still as well. And we see that replicated with vaccines. That's beginning to shift, right? But vaccine access. And so, yeah, it's been really important, I think, to find one another. And one of the challenges of the pandemic, which is true for everyone, whether you're infected or affected, is the kinds of physical isolation that it can cause. We do hear constant ongoing reports of gaslighting by doctors who, through their training, run the battery of existing tests in all due diligence and with great intention, and yet what COVID manifests can't somehow match, right? So my doctors cannot figure out what's going on with my GI, for instance, right? My neurologist is working with colleagues across the United States to use off-label medicines that were developed for Parkinson's or for psychiatric treatment to see if that might help with brain fog. So people are beginning, and of course, there's massive efforts afoot on the research and medical side to build a shared body of knowledge and make it accessible across language and jurisdiction, et cetera. But to your point, the lived experience is way ahead still of where the medicine is. The hope, though, is that tragically, because there's so many long haulers, it's somewhere between 25 and 35% of people who get infected become long haulers, which is a staggering number. Millions and millions of people. It gives us an opportunity, if we can start doing some tracking, to build an amazing data set and body of knowledge that will benefit us when the next viral challenge hits, which it of course will. So there's great opportunity here as well.
Yeah, that's actually something that we're looking at from a work perspective, is transitioning from the COVID symptom study app to how we can keep something like that going once people's attention span for COVID is kind of waned.
Thank you for your work, Ben. Really appreciate it.
I hate to cut in here, but we're at 2 o'clock here in Arizona. So I want to thank everybody who presented today. I mean, without you, we wouldn't have had anything, of course. But, you know, from me personally, this was a real big deal. And I'm really thankful that you guys were willing to present and everything. Those of you who are attending also, again, thank you for coming. It's, you know, we can't do this in a vacuum. So it's really nice to have you guys here. So I really encourage you to come tomorrow. Tomorrow it's kind of an art and theater focus, but we also have an English long presentation in there tomorrow. That's very interesting in dealing with the pandemic and how they addressed writing in the pandemic and so forth. So I do really encourage you guys, if you can, come tomorrow. Otherwise, again, thank you so much.